Welcome to the Assigning Discrete Trial Training Programs to a Student video guide. First, you want to log into the Guiding Technologies website. Then you want to navigate to the Therapy tab at the top of the page. Select the student you would like to add a discrete trial training program for. In the student, you want to select Add New and then DTT. At the top of the page here, we have the filters for the different programs. Each filter gets more and more specific until you find the program you want. Here I'm going to select an early skills program category and then matching for video purposes. Once you have selected the program you would like to assign to your student, you can go down to the targets. Here are a list of the available targets within that program. For the video, I'm going to select the first three: match throwing, match jumping, and match yawning. All three of these fall within the identical matching program category. After you've selected the targets you wish to put into your program, you can head over to the Selected Targets box to change things about them. The B determines if you want the baseline to be given in your program. If you do not wish for the baseline to be given, click the B so it grays out. If you do, select it again so it's bolded in blue. If you wish to take out any of your selected targets, select the X to the far right to send it back into the available targets. If you wish to put it back in, just go back to the available targets and check the box again. If you wish to switch around the order, select any of the arrows. If you want to move a target lower, click the down arrow. If you want to move it higher, select the up arrow.
Once you have selected your targets and their desired settings, you can head over to the Fields options. To the right, we have our field options. We have our min number of fields and maximum number of fields, between 1 and 3. This is the default setting. If you would like to change it so that you only go from field 2 to field 3, you can change your min to 2. Or if you want to go from 1 to 2, you could change your max to 2 and your min to 1. If you would like to only have one field shown, then just select the min and the max to be the same thing, like this. So if I only wanted field 2, I'd have 2 and 2. But by default they're at 1 and 3, so you go through all 3 fields. The next field setting we have is our train by setting. We can choose between level from low to high or to target. Level low to high means that the baseline is given between each field. So we have our baseline, then we have our field of 1 for each of our selected targets, our baseline, then our field of 2 for selected targets, then our baseline and our field of 3 for selected targets. The target setting has it so that the baseline shows at the highest field, which would be our field of 3, and then upon failing the baseline, you move down to lower fields. After the field settings, we have our criteria settings. First, we can set our criteria for our baseline and each of our individual fields, so they don't necessarily have to be the same. Our first setting for the baseline is our min trials to calculate goal percentage, which is just the minimum number of trials that is going to be used to calculate our goal percent. Our next setting is our goal percent, which is the percent of trials that are completed successfully in order to move on to the next goal. The next setting we have is whether we want our baseline given once or until mastered. If we have it set to once, it'll only be shown once at the beginning of our first trial. If we want it until mastered, it'll be shown every single time we practice the target. Our last baseline setting is called on correct, and we could choose from reinforce or do not. So we can either reinforce after a correct baseline, or we can just not reinforce and move on. After we have finished our baseline settings, we can move on to our field settings. An important note is that back in the Fields tab, if you selected low to high, because there will be a baseline in between each field, you can differ your baseline settings for each baseline in between each field. But because my settings are for target, there's only one baseline. That's why I can only change the baseline settings for this one. But after our baseline settings, we can move on to our field settings. At the top of our field settings, it's the same as our baseline settings. We have our minimum number of trials to calculate our goal percentage, and then our goal percentage. Then we have our correct responses to decrease our prompt, which is just how many correct responses we have to move down a prompt level. And then we have our incorrect responses to increase the prompt, which is how many incorrect responses we need to move back up a prompt level. But then below these, we have some new settings. So our next setting is whether or not we want to reinforce a step on correction. If we do, we select the reinforce button. If we don't, we can select the do not button. If we do, we have this setting that pops up called prompts to reinforce, which lets you choose which prompts you would like to reinforce between our least help prompt, remembered and faded prompts, and all prompts. But if we select do not, we'll see that this setting disappears. Our next setting is our starting prompt level, which is after failure of the baseline, what prompt level you will start on with your trial. You can choose between the most help prompt, any individual prompt, or our least help prompt. After that, we have our different instructors tab and our different days tabs. These are just how many instructors are going to be working with your student. Because I'm the only instructor for this student, I'm going to have it set to 1. And our different days tab is over how many days you need to successfully complete a goal to move on to the next goal. The next setting we have is our consecutive session setting. This setting is just whether or not we want our goal percentage to carry on to consecutive sessions or reset upon consecutive sessions. If we would like it to carry over, we can select yes. If not, we can select no. After you finish your settings for your field of 1, the settings for field of 2 and 3 do not automatically update to match it. As we can see here, my different instructors is set to 1, but if I go down to field of 2, it's set to 2. So you would have to, if you want the same settings across all 3, you'd have to set the settings for field of 2 and 3 to match that of 1. After you've finished your settings for your fields and baseline, you can go over to the prompts. Here we have a list of all our available prompts. By default, they're all put in. If we would like to get rid of any of them, we can select the red X to the right of their name. And if we'd like to move any of them around, we can select the arrows to move them up or down as we please. At the bottom of our page here, we have our therapy settings. Our first therapy setting is the number of targets to train at the same time, which is just the number of targets that will appear in the app at once. By default, this is set to 1, but we could change it by either selecting the up or down arrows or typing in whatever number we would like. Our next setting is a max trials per trial set. This setting is just how many trials it will cap out at. We can change it by either using the up or down arrows or typing in whatever number we want. Our next setting is start with last prompt. If this is set to yes, the prompt level that you ended on in a previous trial set will be the prompt level you start on in the next trial set. If it is set to no, your prompt level will reset upon a new trial set. Our final therapy setting is called Discriminate Mastered Targets, or Mix. If this is set to yes, after mastering targets, a mix of those different targets will be presented. A quick side note is that if our num targets to train at the same time is greater than 1, this will automatically be disabled, even if you have selected yes. Now I am going to demonstrate assigning a new DTT therapy altogether. So first we want to go back into our website, select the therapy tab, select the student we'd like to assign the therapy to, add new DTT. Now we need to choose what therapy we'd like to add. I'm going to go with an early skill. I'm going to go matching and matching pictures of animals. I'm going to select matching dog, cat, bird. Fields, I'm going to have it set from low to high, so we're going to have a baseline and then our field of 1 for each of them, baseline field of 2 for each of them, and baseline field of 3 for each of them. Criteria, I'm going to have this all set to default except for I'm going to be the only instructor and only over 1 day for each of our fields. But other than that, we're going to use the default settings. We're going to have our default prompts, and then all of this will remain the same, and we'll add this to my student's path. Here we'll see the program I just added and all the targets in the order they'll be shown. Because we have mixing on, we'll have our mixes thrown in at the end. So now when you go into the Gains app and select the student you assign the program to, you should see the program in the program list page with the current target. When we go in, the first thing that's going to show up is the baseline. If we fail the baseline, we start at our lowest prompt level and work back up. Let's say all of these are successes. Then when we go back in, we can go through normally. And then we'll move through to cat, because that was our next target after dog. If we succeed in our baseline instead of failing in our baseline, we can move straight to bird. And then once we get through bird field of 1, we'll move on to dog field of 2. And that's how we'll progress through our trials.